March or April 2023. Pretty well. Let's see, Jason is excused, Alan is excused. Sylvia is excused. And that's not what it is. April. Can you hear?
Oh, there's nobody here.
Oh.
Back from the
Okay.
streaming. We're streaming. We're live on YouTube.
I'd like to, everybody have a chance to look over the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor? All right, on to public comment. Public comment. On the new business. Invasive plants, noxious weed presentation. Welcome.
Faster our meetings are pretty fast.
We don't mess around here. We're on it. Heroes or space.
Okay, great. So hi, I'm Ann Schuster. I work for the Washington State Office of Weed Control Board. I'm the education specialist for them. Been in the position for about 2 years, but before that, I was doing different types of restoration work and environmental outreach around Western Washington for mostly nonprofits and some municipalities. I made a short presentation, and it's the same one I gave this morning for a last minute presentation that I had this morning. So I hope it is helpful to you. I don't know. I'm going to briefly go over weed laws in Washington and classes and how to get involved. Classifications, not classes, like because this is a class. How weeds impact us is like the main point of the PowerPoint, and then how everyone can help. So Janet is on the weed board, and basically the weed board like updates the weed law and serves as stewards to Washington, especially for our natural resources and our agricultural resources. The staff, we do a lot of coordinating between weed boards and districts and doing outreach like this and helping with things like grants. So Janet is one of the 2 regional interest representatives, but we also have 4 elected members. In addition to that, 3 scientific advisors, and then there are 4 individuals who are appointed by WSDA, and one's Washington Weed Districts, one is WSDA, there's a few in there. But some, like the scientific advisors are non-voting, and positions like Janet's are voting. So the weed law was originally created in 1975. Yeah, 1975, and we've just pretty much been updating it since then. The original weed law, that was a little different one than the one we have now, was from 1895, and that was for just Canada thistle. And that was just Canada thistle's noxious weed. We're going to try and stop it. You can see how all that works. So there's 2 main weed laws in Washington. So the noxious weed list is the one that the weed board administers, and then the prohibited plants list or the quarantine list is administered by Department of Agriculture. And there are 2 separate things, but there's a lot of overlap between them as far as species goes. And I'll get into the quarantine list in a little bit. But first, I'm going to go through the noxious weed list. So right now, until actually the end of the week, like Sunday at midnight, anybody from the public can propose a change to the weed law. That means new species, that means delisting species, that means uplisting, downlisting. Any change whatsoever has to happen between January 1st and April 30th. Then the following few months, the Noxious Weed Committee looks at those proposals, researches the proposals, and they eventually make a recommendation to the board about what should and shouldn't be taken as the weed law. And there's a hearing that happens the day before the vote, and so there's that public hearing, and then the board takes all the information into account and makes their votes, and that happens in November. And then the whole process starts all over again in January. So once we have the weed list at the state level, all the counties have their own weed list that they have 90 days to put into order. So they have to take all Class A's that are put on the list You have to take all class Bs that are designated in their location, and then they can choose other things to take. So they'll choose probably quite a few class Cs. They can choose species that aren't on the list at all. They can even choose native species if they really wanted to. A lot of times those third level listings of choices for the counties are for like education and outreach it turns into. They don't usually have resources to control those plants. Although things like Tree of Heaven is a class C that some counties have required for control. That looks bad at this quality. Okay, that's good to know. All right, so class A's are the highest priority species. They are plants that have the potential to cause massive harm to Washington, either through economic damage, environmental damage, or even human health damage. And lots of times these are things that are really rare because they're so bad we want to get rid of them. Sometimes they're things that don't even exist in Washington yet. I think it's Russian knapweed, if I remember correctly, is one that there are a few sightings of it in like Idaho, and it has been found in Washington that want it to be found. Other things like kudzu, it has been found in Washington, and then it's eradicated, and you just want to keep up with that and never have it take foot. And other things like this Oriental clematis, they're dealing with a massive infestation of it in Yakima County, and they're working on eradicating it. It's going to take a little bit of time. Now they're starting to use drones to eradicate it, actually. It's working really, really well. Things like this on this list they're required for eradication, which means all plant parts have to be disposed of and have to be completely removed from the environment. So disposed of usually means, especially in small amounts, like in a black trash bag and in a landfill. Some municipalities have the ability to get their compost hot enough to destroy weed seeds, depending on species, but not all do. So it's always a really good idea to check with whoever manages the solid waste or green waste in your area. So when I say eradicate all plant parts, it means roots, stems, leaves, all parts of it have to be destroyed. Some things to be chipped or burned.
What is the philosophy regarding using chemicals or pulling it out of the ground?
You can use chemicals to kill it. And I believe that I think it depends on the species, but you can probably, a lot of times it will break down and you can leave it there.
Is that what the drones are doing, this with the chemicals?
Yeah. So first they use the drones on the Oriental clematis to map it. And then they use it to spray. So they're using it for 2 different tasks. And then they're probably also going to use it to monitor it to see how much die back.
So this Oriental clematis is only in Africa, right?
Right now that we know of, yes.
That's why it's this particular one is something in trees, and so it can actually root in the parts of the trees,
Mhm.
and so that's why they have to get the drone up there.
And like this is on like a cliffside, like you can't get up there to spray that. Yeah.
Would that have been something that somebody had purposely introduced, not knowing that it was gonna be a problem? The fact that it's so isolated to just Yakima makes me think that somebody in Yakima thought that was a really good idea.
Probably, like that's a flower of it. Hard to tell from the pixelated version, but it's a really pretty flower.
Yeah.
It climbs things. I can see you wanting to make like a trellis out of it.
Yeah.
But the seeds spread on the wind really easily. They're kind of fluffy and they're everywhere. And then it gets in a tree and you can't reach it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of plants got into Washington by being ornamentals, some on accident, but really a lot of the noxious weeds are pretty or waste or both. Class B weeds are the next level down. They're a little bit confusing. They're kind of halfway between C and A weeds. It just depends on where you are. So Scotch broom is an example of a class B weed. It's really common on our side of the state, but it's much rarer on the eastern side of the state. So in those areas, it is actually still economically feasible to control it. So that's the places where it's actually required for control so that they don't get to the point that we are on our side. So places in Western Washington, they might ask people to control it, but probably no places requiring it to control because it would not be economically feasible to do. And class B weeds I say controls of eradicate because that just means any plant part that can reproduce has to be destroyed. So for Scotch broom, that just means the flowers and seeds. Mowing it counts as control. But like knotweed, it can spread from any bit left behind. So knotweed would be the complete plant. Glass seaweeds are really widespread. Sometimes they're a little bit easier to control. Sometimes they're just more naturalized. They're usually just in very high infestations all over. Like Canada thistle is a very broad example of one. But we have quite a few things on this list that there's a lot of them, and not many people are going to have resources to control them compared to the higher priority ones, at least. The monitor list are plants that we just want more information about. We're not sure what their impacts are right now. So they're things that we maybe don't know their range, we don't know if they're harmful in certain situations, and there's no legal definition to these plants. They're not on any kind of legal list. We're just keeping an eye on them, and we tend to use like landscape practitioners and people out on the landscape, citizen scientists and stuff. Will just, any one of those people out there will see a sighting, report it to the sponsor of that plant, and then every few years the Noxious Weed Committee asks for all those sightings and makes recommendations based on that, how many sightings there were over how many years. Some things might not be a problem at all, and some things might be a big problem.
What's that top critical?
That is, all of those are stinking iris, also known as roast beef.
Yes.
Certainly it smells bad. But I think they call it roast beef because of the kind of purpley brown flowers and
Roast beef.
roast beef.
That's when the roast beef turns purple, you shouldn't eat it.
All right.
Stinking iris.
Stinking iris. And so this one is sponsored by someone up in San Juan County. They've had some sightings. They're not sure if it's going to be invasive in other parts of the state. The quarantine list, also known as the prohibited plants list, is the one that's administered by WSDA rather than the Noxious Weed Board. They also take input from the public on things to be added to it, but they do it a lot more infrequently, every 5-ish years. It's also kind of hard to get a hold of them and to submit proposals. When I've told people, when people have complained to me about like English ivy being allowed to be sold, I say, we are in control of that, but you can propose it to them. And then people will message the prohibited plants list administrators, and they will just forward it back to me.
That bottom one, is that a succulent? Is that what that is?
No, so that is all water chestnut. All three of those pictures are water chestnut. You just can't see. So that's actually floating on water, and they're really thin leaves. Everything that is class A automatically gets added to the prohibited plants list. They take a lot of class Bs and Cs, not all of them. There are quite a few plants that are on the list, prohibited plants list, that aren't on the weed list. And almost all of those are problems in like aquatic, like just aquariums, like in captivity. And I think they would be a problem in the industry, but they wouldn't be a problem out in our nature, I think. I'm not sure, but I think that's why we don't have them on our Noxious Weed list, but they're still prohibited to be sold in Washington. All right, so the prohibited plants list are plants that are not allowed to be sold in Washington, into Washington, within Washington. Any plant part of these plants cannot be sold. So I go to a lot of fairs and I see people making jewelry out of the water chestnut seeds. They're pretty big and they look really interesting. And I see people making jewelry out of them. And they're not actually supposed to be doing that. Even though the seed poly isn't viable anymore, they're not supposed to be doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's people also call it like Batman pod, Batman seed, Batman plant. Yeah. So these are some resources for helping get control for your plants that you have problems with, and also for plant identification. Because you're going to want to know what you're looking at before you spend a bunch of resources to control it. You probably don't want to kill your Oregon grape that you think is holly. So we at the board, we can help when we can. I can identify pictures that are sent to me. Or if I don't know them, I usually send them out to somebody who I think would know from maybe that part of the state, has more expertise with like eastern Washington grasses, that sort of thing. Local county weed board, local extension office, and your local conservation district are all really excellent sources. The Washington Invasive Species Council is kind of like the Noctis Weed Board, but for any species that's invasive. So they do animals, plants, fungi, viruses, bacteria, all kinds of things. And they just have priorities because there's so many more things that are just invasive. So like they have a program for feral hogs, and they have a big push right now, obviously, for tree of heaven and spotted lanternfly stuff. Just they are also good resources, especially for non-plant problems. And then you can't tell on the bottom, but the last one is the Burke Herbarium website. Their herbarium photo gallery and plant ID thing just came back up after being hacked in December. I'm so glad they're back up. I love them so much. I always use them for identifying plants. Other people have had success with like a little AI, take a picture. I like to say always double check that identification that it gives you, because if they're wrong a lot. Especially for like grasses and things that all kind of look the same. They don't really know what they're looking at, but for
Can you give us that address that we can't see?
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you have that?
So, yeah. Okay,
At least we'll send it out.
yeah, so if
Okay,
you
thanks.
search for Burke Herbarium, you should get there. Like I usually just search for like the species name I'm looking for, and then Burke or the family name and Burke, and I'll get there.
BERG.
BURKE, yeah, BURKE.
Like the Burke Museum,
Yeah, it's run through the Burke Museum.
we'll send the whole presentation out to you folks.
All right, thanks.
So now I'm gonna go through how noxious weeds are bad for us and our environment and our economy in lots of ways. So
Wait, did you back up a little bit, class A, so what happens if you have a class A weed and you're not taking it?
you can get in trouble. So there's a list of fines and penalties, and the noxious weed board can enforce control on you if you're not doing it. Usually they'll try to help you control it. But not always, depending on their resources or depending on if you try to chase them off with like a gun, they're probably not going to be so willing to help you, but we're able to. So, yeah. So, like on the most extreme end, if you don't control your class A's, you can lose the rights to your property. They can take away your property, I believe. I don't know all the fines and penalties, but yeah.
Yeah, class A is Christians.
Mhm.
Is that really driven by the county? The county drives it, the state sets it up here, but the county
Yeah,
pushes it. Okay.
yeah. So us at the state, there's only 2 staff people.
Yeah,
And so I do like education, outreach, and plant ID. And my supervisor, Mary, does a lot of legislative stuff and coordinating stuff. And grant stuff. So we don't do any kind of enforcements or control on our end.
But you have the county, at the county level, you have county commissioners. Have a big board and they support the weed. So then they are responsible for it. And it does get dangerous sometimes.
Yeah. I've heard some stories that have, I guess, yeah, that's where I've heard those stories from, but yeah. So noxious weeds are bad for us as humans in a lot of ways. Like, sure, some of them are spiky, some of them are toxic, so that's not great. Like, those are burns from giant hogweed, and those burns will be, I believe, for like 4 or 5 years, really sensitive to sunlight. So that person, after they got that burn, they probably had to keep that arm covered for like 5 years, otherwise it would blister again. Other things are listed because of the damage, or they do a lot of damage to us in other ways. So like over here, that's English ivy that is going to be damaging that power line. Some species harbor pest species. So that's a tree of heaven. And that is a host plant for the spotted lanternfly, which when it gets to Washington will cause massive economic damage as well as environmental damage, because it feeds on basically every agricultural crop we make, hops, grapes, apples, everything. But a few of our native species as well, it likes to eat big leaf maple. And they're not doing so here yet. It's not here yet. It will get here. Just a matter of when.
My backyard looks very much like that picture of the English ivy there, with ivy going up all the trees. Years ago, our next door neighbors thought it would be a great idea to plant all this English ivy, and it has completely, we live on a slope,
Oh,
and it has completely taken over. Do you have any recommendations?
So cut it. I cut every vine that goes up the trees, and that will starve the ones
Yeah,
in the
we do
trees.
that.
And then for the stuff in the ground, I like the roll and hack method,
I've been
but
to,
that's difficult for slopes.
yes,
I honestly would reach out to like your conservation district or your county board to see if they have assistance they can give you with herbicide, because, and if there's not water at the bottom of the ravine, and if there is, then they
there
would
is some
have
creek at the
the,
bottom, but it's a long way down.
they would have the proper aquatics, like certifications to deal with and use the herbicide that would be necessary for any ivy that's like near the creek. Ivy's tough and it's really waxy, so even lots of herbicides don't work. You need like herbicides that have special surfactants in it to help get through the waxy layer. It's tough.
Yeah,
So you can get a goat.
yeah, no kidding.
And ghosts like hills too. What about pigs?
They planted it, then they moved.
Great.
And they left us to fight it.
You know, the thing with English ivy is, as we go through and we prune it up and remove it from the
Mhm.
ground up 3, 4 feet, whatever. Then it dies in the tree and then you have all this dry growth.
It's so
up.
awful.
And it's a fire hazard for a
Mm.
while, you know, until
Yeah,
all the leaves come down.
yeah,
So it's a double whammy.
it's, yeah, and it's still allowed to be sold in Washington,
Yeah.
so people are still buying it and planting it.
Well, I'm always going out, we've got plants that I'm trying to start, and I have to keep rescuing them from the English ivy because it keeps trying to take over it,
Yeah,
and, you know.
yeah.
Can you talk about the damage from Japanese dumping?
Yeah, so Japanese knotweed will like grow up through cement. Oh, I saw a video of some people in UK. It was growing in their basement and it was ruining their basement. Some of these plants can grow up through our infrastructure, through our cement so well. They're so strong, they're so tenacious, and they're things that like you put a weed tarp over it, that's not gonna take care of it, it's gonna grow through that weed tarp.
Yeah, chemicals for. Wait, use of chemicals on Japanese.
I have had very good success using herbicide on my neighbor's Japanese knotweed. It's, oh my gosh. Well, I don't want it to get on my property, right? I live on a creek and it spreads up and down the creek and also can like dam up the creek when it falls in. And so I told my neighbor, if you buy the herbicide, I'll do the treatment. And yeah, so it's doing well. Oh, so they also will hinder our visual ability on like roadsides. So like right now, WashDOT is super low staffed, super underfunded, and they don't have resources to deal with things like scotch broom on the side of the road. So the problems with these noxious weeds can really get into pretty much every aspect of our day-to-day life that you might not even consider.
I used to live in the South, and every intersection, every bridge looks just like that. It's completely covered. I mean, it's just everywhere. They've completely taken over.
And sometimes like you don't want to get to the tipping point, and get really too bad to even handle and have it become naturalized or something. It's not good. So noxious weeds are obviously going to be bad for livestock. So that is a cow that died from poison hemlock ingestion. Poison hemlock can kill even after it's been dried, and especially if it's baled into hay, that's really bad. So you don't want things that are spiky and thorny, especially if you're growing animals or just raising animals for like their leather. You definitely don't want them to have thorns and spines, but also maybe don't want them to have be all spiked up anyway. And this is in Thurston County. This was all the tansy ragwort that was taken from just like one horse farm. And horses die from tansy ragwort really easily. They also get addicted to it apparently, so they'll start eating it. They think they really like it, and then the toxins will get them. So they also, Dr. Sweets also farm our agriculture. They reduce forage for livestock. They often increase the herbicide use for the agricultural producer. They increase the amount of time the agricultural producer has to spend on manual control in addition to the herbicide, because some things don't respond as well to herbicide, or you can't use herbicide in certain situations. Then both of those things increase our food prices. And the same thing with the livestock, especially for cattle and chickens, things that we eat. Lots of plants that grow in wet areas, like this yellow flag iris, end up clogging the irrigation networks. And that's a big problem. Then, once again, they harbor pest species like the spotted lanternfly, once again, rearing its ugly head that when it gets to Washington, it's going to do massive damage to our agriculture. It's going to be bad.
So what's this life cycle? How's it related to the tree?
So they're doing research to find out exactly what stage of this life cycle requires tree of heaven, but they're pretty sure one of the next instars, one of the stages of its childhood phase kind of require tree of heaven in order to, they're not sure if it's to reproduce period or to have the ability to reproduce, but they seem to require tree of heaven at an early stage in their life. So if we can get rid of all the tree of heaven, then when the spotted lanternfly gets here, it won't be able to really complete its life cycle successfully.
You tell me there's a fern and a tree of heaven.
I have a little bit of, I can go.
You don't have to, that's all right.
Okay, so this is pretty big. So that's like a tree. And those are going to be very long compound leaves. So that means that that's going to be one leaf made up of many leaflets. And it looks like it's I don't know, 21 leaves. So they're just very small leaflets growing up that.
Okay.
It also smells bad. So if you mush it a little bit, it smells like rotten peanut butter, and you look vomity, it doesn't smell good. And also the females, when they get old enough, they'll flower. So our ferns won't flower, and they form into a full-size tree. That's a young plant,
Okay, they're tree size.
but they can get
All right.
30 meters tall, and they can grow like a meter a year. Yeah, or 2 meters a year, depending on the situation. Yeah,
I've never seen them all around.
they're all around.
It smells like, I see them here, the whole thing blocks over and you see them. Like
In
that.
September is probably when they're the most obvious from distance, because that's when the female plants have out their seeds, and their seed pods are these big clumps of the kind of similar texture to a big leaf maple seed, papery, and they'll float on the wind the same way. And there are these big clumps of just thousands of seed, and they're just covering these trees all the way along I-5, all the way to Portland. In September. Yeah,
I don't know
Yeah,
that.
very beautiful.
they're beautiful. They smell good.
The way they got here was the Chinese laborers would bring them over and plant them because they grew fast, they had a shade, and they were good luck. Of course, then the spotted lanternfly, the Chinese spotted lanternfly is followed them.
Mhm. So that's just a little one growing in a drainage ditch, but they get full on trees and they're pretty.
So the yellow flag iris is growing all around still in lake shoreline. And I found one plant in Bradley Lake. There were a whole bunch of them in American Lake. They're very beautiful. The geese like to eat the seeds and distribute them. But now we've been told that if we can remove those seed heads, that's a pretty good way of at least controlling their spread. Is that right?
I think that would help a lot, but if they're like other irises, they're also reproducing rhizonously through that bulbs.
And those rhizomes is what's taking over the shorelines.
Yeah. So noxious weeds will harm forestry. They actively damage trees like you've seen with the
Yes.
English ivy. They also just hinder harvesting and reforestation efforts. Things like holly will seed a lot if it's suddenly in a clearing. And then those seeds go everywhere, and then you have a whole lot more, and then you have to replant underneath that and harvest through it somehow. Also, the increase of herbicide use and manual control time will both increase the cost of forestry like products, I suppose. Obviously harms the environment. These areas tend to have, that are really highly infested, have lower biodiversity and habitat quality. So this is the Oriental clematis picture again. You can imagine that there's absolutely no species underneath that carpet of Oriental clematis. This pond of purple loosestrife is now no longer good habitat for like waterfowl, fish, that sort of thing. A lot of times these plants, like with the yellow flag iris, they won't hold onto the soil as well, so there's a lot more erosion. And then the soil is in the water, the trees are dying back, and the salmon can't survive in a silty like creek that has a lot of sun, and that's bad for them. It does also hinder our recreation. If we have lower animal amounts, then we're not going to have as good luck fishing, hunting, even just viewing wildlife. It'll be more difficult to run or kayak or ride your bike. You wouldn't want to run your bike through a puncture vine carpet because those can puncture through bike tires. I grew up with puncture vine in New Mexico. And then you wouldn't want to swim through this milfoil lake. And also a lot of aquatic species will just hitch a ride on boats and kayaks to the next location. So they spread along our waterways that way really, really easily. Then, like you said, that fire hazards, you said with the dry leaves on the English ivy, some of these species burn really fast. Some of them just, they dry up and die in the summer. And then that is just a lot of biomass for fuel, for fires. Things like holly are a really good ladder fuel to the crown. And so like things like the holly, they're really oily. And so they end up being a really excellent ladder fuel to get to the crown. And then these plants are pretty much, almost all of them are really good at invading after a disturbance. So you get things like this field of thistle that these people didn't reseed or replant or do things after this fire went through very well, and it was completely taken over by these thistles. So it'd be great to replant after a disturbance. That's what I'm getting into next. So all that bad doom and gloom, we can help. We can help get rid of the noxious weeds and help our fellow man and help our environment. So one great thing to do is to learn the noxious weeds, learn how to identify plants, even just on a basic level, learn the resources that there are available, especially online, to identify noxious weeds, and then how to control them. So you don't want to be spending a whole lot of time like removing a native fern, but you might want to spend more time removing that tree of heaven. Then once you know, you can teach others, because it's really great to get things through the society, up and down through generations, because that's the only way we're going to really spread the word. If I tell you and none of you teach anybody, then it's closed to just us. It's really important to clean your boots, your boats, your tires between sites, especially if you think you picked up a bunch of seeds or seeds that might be stuck in mud. So boot brushes are great, hosing down things. There's a few like boat cleaning inspection areas between lakes. I'm not sure on the resources of that, but I believe WDFW and the Washington Invasive Species Council have resources on that. Remove invasive plants when you get the chance, so either on your property or if you were to volunteer with a group. And then it's great to plant native plants. That's always a good option, or plant plants that aren't invasive. There's lots of options of plants that are just non-invasive, and that's a really good option, especially after you've removed a bunch of noxious weeds. You don't want something else, especially something worse coming in. You really want to be able to hold that ground. That's it. Thank you.
So if I Google Pierce County noxious weeds identification, will that be enough to get me what I need for my yard?
So if you want to do plant identification, I would either go to the state noxious weed website. King County is pretty good, and also the Burke website. Pierce County, I haven't explored their website very much. I don't think they have any kind of weed ID. And as of last week, their website was down last week, so I don't even know what's
Okay.
happening right now.
Yeah, we have a bunch of literature we could bring. and
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
And you could,
Appreciate it.
I mean, give it out at the, I can give all of you guys stuff, but I've got bags of it in the garage.
I have a question. John Q. Public, you said is authorized to ask for weeds to be removed from the list. Why do they do, what would be the common reason for that?
I imagine if somebody maybe wants to grow it perhaps, or if they think it isn't a problem, or that it's so widespread, like I could see that this will, like somebody making an argument to delist it because there's no way.
So it
anybody-
doesn't happen very often.
I've never heard of it happening, but it can.
Okay,
But we have people from Pierce County that submit candidates,
Mhm.
and then the science committee goes and looks at it, and we got something listed up in Carroll Marsh last year that Nancy, what's her name?
Henderson.
Yeah, Nancy Henderson suggested it, and
to be added or?
to be added.
Yeah, to be added, I can
It
understand
was all
that.
over the place, and
Yeah, they did a big eradication
Well-
trying to get it out.
yeah.
One way that things are sometimes removed at a local level is if something's a class B, then they can propose it to be undesignated in their location. So actually Pierce County has put in this round a proposal to undesignate shiny leaf geranium in Pierce County. And that's because it had been designated here, which means they would have been required to control it within 1 calendar year, all shiny leaf geranium. But there's so much, it wasn't gonna be economically feasible anymore. It was just spreading so fast. And so that's what we're gonna go through. The board usually is okay with taking the county's word for things.
Is that one of those that is being sold?
No, it just spreads really well.
Oh,
It's kind of pretty, but it's no straight to other geraniums.
How many weeds are on the class A? It's-
Class A
Does it
list,
change from county to county or?
no, it's straight off across
Okay.
at the state level. I think 50 or 70, I don't remember, but it's a lot. Like we have 200 something plants on over all the lists. Yeah.
One of the things that we have the Washington State University Extension Service, we have the Master Gardener Program, and they're at the farmers market every week. And those folks are great resources. They have lots of books and materials and items there, as well as if you bring something in, they can help identify it. And so it's a really good resource, and they love for people to come and talk to them. So if you had something that you were concerned about or worried about, I've brought things in before too, like, what is this? Is this something I should like grow? Is this something that I should get rid of? It looks kind of pretty. And they're like, no, get rid of it, so
It's been
they're a
very
good resource. Cause weeds look pretty too. They don't always smell like stinky roast beef or rotten peanut butter. Yeah.
Was good.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on to prepare for the joint city council meeting.
So I think all of you are not new, but I'll just mention it again. So once a month or once a year, the city council meets with each of its advisory boards. Of course, we're advisory to the city council. Tonight, we have 2 council members here. Did they get introduced?
Well,
Vito?
yeah, introduce yourself.
Justin Larsella, new member of city council. Nice to meet you guys.
He just did a park tour, so he wanted to come and learn more about it. He's been on sort of the circuit, learning about the different groups and the different organizations. And of course, Councilmember Donnie has been with us for quite some time. So the council meets with their park board. And so one of the things we always do is we talk about what we worked on last year, and then they approved our work program in January, but we also just realign and share with what we're planning to work on this year. And then it's just a great time to have a conversation with them about if there's any issues, concerns that you have, if there's a question that You know, we want to ask them, council directs our work program, so if there was something that we wanted to work on, it's a good time to talk to the council about it. What are their thoughts? Is this something that they'd like more information on? Is this something that they're concerned about? And it's just a good dialogue to have with the council. So typically we take turns. Vito, Jason usually do some of the introduction and some of the accomplishments. And then if we come up with a list of questions, we sometimes round robin that so everybody has a chance to kind of interact and participate. First of all, we want to take a look. Did we forget anything, right? Was there something that we did that we might have forgotten to include from one of our accomplishments? And the accomplishments might be that we actually took action on something. The accomplishments could be that we reviewed something and moved it forward to council. I mean, everything we do is advisory, but, and then, or we received, you know, maybe a presentation on it. So, or you approved an Eagle Scout project or something. So maybe take a look at this and at first talk about the accomplishments, what we worked on last year, and then, you know, some of these work plan things we've accomplished and some of them are coming, so. This would be the interactive portion of the program.
Mary, I'm noticing that I forgot to have the Eagle projects that were last month's Eagle projects.
All right,
For
and do you know
July.
what they are? Because you did for Eagle Project Cal, council's not gonna know what that is.
Okay, I'll put that in here.
Yeah. Nobody's noticing anything that we accomplished or worked on that you were particularly excited about that we forgot to include? Okay. Are there any topics that you think that we would want to, as a group, again, you're an advisory board, not individuals. Are there any topics that you as a board think that we might want to mention? Are there any trends that you might want to share? Are there any concerns that you would like to get feedback from council on?
I'm gonna speak for the American Lake Improvement Club. We've been concerned for years about the safety of swimmers at the parks, and is there any way that we could contract lifeguards or something, if we could? I know we don't have staff, I know it's a problem, but it's something that is continually on the minds of the residents.
Yeah, I would say, we appreciate that, and lifeguards do provide good prevention out there at the park. But, and as you know, we've had them for a long time, they ended up doing more site security than prevention in the water, and they can't be in two places, one's at the front, so. So that's a challenge, I would say,
I just don't want it to go forgotten.
well, yeah, and I appreciate that. Our main issue, you know, is that we don't have a pool, so we don't have a feeder program. Often places that have outdoor waterfront beaches, they have pools, so they have lifeguards, they have swimming lessons, they do that. So we don't have that, so every year it was a challenge before COVID to even staff up for the summer, because we would run 7 days a week, and we would run from primarily July, 4th of July, before 4th of July till Labor Day. So that's been a challenge. We didn't do it during COVID. You couldn't get trained, you couldn't get certified because, you know, you weren't supposed to touch anybody. So that didn't happen. And we are just working on trying to do swimming at this summer, and the pools are concerned they're not going to even be able to open on a regular schedule because they don't have lifeguards. So I'm not sure how you would contract for them. And we did work with the pools to find lifeguards. We did partner a bit with training. But it's kind of a struggle for us. Again, it's not our typical day-to-day business. So I would say I appreciate that. We do put up the swimming ropes. We do work with our Marine Patrol. We do have folks in the parks. And last year, might not have been last year, could have been 3 years ago because of COVID, but we did work with the YMCA, and they did come down and do swimming lessons at the park for kids on, I think it was 1 day a week for a few weeks. And so I know Cameron's working to see if they can come in and do just some, you know, basic lifeguard or swim classes at the shoreline. So
That's better than nothing.
yeah. And I think John Fraser with the Marine Marine Patrol, one of the things that we did many years ago was we had a board where we had life vests on it. And so we just bring it down with the lifeguards and we take it back so that we didn't lose them all, because when they get left out there, people take them. And his response was, so what? They take it, they're safer. I'm like, well, okay, so,
Would you consider, because a lot of us residents have lots of leftover life jackets, do we have a board and just hang our life jackets there?
no, I think that's more of it. If it's not a certified life jacket, we can't guarantee that it's not, there's, you know, that it meets the criteria for it. So I wouldn't want to put an unsafe thing out there and create a risk factor. We've in the past worked with the fire department and Mary Bridge Hospital to get life vests because they do it at a pretty reduced rate. So, but I can appreciate your concern, but I would just remind everybody that lifeguards are not what's the word I used to say? It's been a long time. They're not a replacement for adult supervision of the water. So people need to, and oftentimes they would send, you know, kids down because, oh, there's lifeguards down there. So, you know, and then they call and they're mad because we won't let the 8-year-old in the pool or in the swim area because he's supervising his 3-year-old child, you know, brother or sister. And it's like, that's just not an appropriate safety measure. So
I just felt like I should
Yeah.
keep this up.
I was just giving you a little bit more feedback on it and, yeah, so,
Under the accomplishments, may have missed it, I don't see capital projects maybe completed.
oh, and the updates.
Yeah. And maybe capital projects completed and maybe pending or something, although the council knows, but maybe that's open dialogue.
One thing that I was actually asked by the constituent recently, it's not unusual, was what has the city done with respect to providing open space and parks? It's a lot. But if there's an increment from this year, whether it's Forest Lake or whatever, or I don't know the timing and actually clearing out the houses at Springbrook, but you know, we've been creeping larger for 25 years.
Yeah,
And the cumulative effect is pretty good. It's not where we want to be, but
we're making progress.
we might say, you know, if there is something, if you're coming from the start of nothing to X number of acres outside of we're still in park. More to come.
More to come. Talk about that in a little bit. Vito, were you looking at maybe a list as opposed to just a mention, there's maybe a little bit more about some of the bigger projects?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we did a couple of updates. Yeah,
Sure.
that sounds good. We can add that. Mhm.
I think it's a good list. Anyone else that have any other comments? Did we leave anything off?
Busy year. Got a busy year ahead of us too. And also, you probably know this, that we approve the minutes of every meeting and they all go to council. So council, they're in their packet. So they read and they hear, like, you know, the concern coming from regarding that. So they do read all the minutes. And so they're up to date with what the boards are talking about. And that sometimes does generate additional conversation during a council meeting. There might be a topic that they want more information on, or, oh, that came up, let's learn more about it. And then it can get scheduled on a future study session or possibly city manager's report. Because if you've seen their council agendas, they are packed and we have a lot of work to do and it has to get scheduled, you know, if it's certain expenses if it's over a certain dollar amount, council has to approve it. For grants, they have to pass resolutions. So they are covering a lot of bases. So we have to be proactive to make sure we're on top of our topics and our activities so we can get on the list, because you know, 6 or 7 topics at a night makes them cranky. So not you.
And then on to the 2023 work plan items, anything else that, I mean, there's some good stuff there. Now, next week, when we meet with, public or the
The
planning commission, and we're gonna talk about the tree preservation ordinance and what urban forestry plan is that there?
Right, and I'm not,
Discuss.
yeah, we had an update on that, but that should probably be on here too, because they're doing a joint, we're doing a joint meeting, so this is a
The
presentation.
joint. Mhm.
Mhm.
What day of the week is that?
And that's,
Thursday.
that's at 6:30.
Is it
right?
Thursday or is it Wednesday?
It's
It's
Thursday here, but
Is it Thursday?
normally Wednesday.
Yeah, it's the planning commission. I'm gonna look at
Yeah,
that.
we'll see the third is the Wednesday.
Yeah, third of
That's right.
Wednesday.
Yeah, I thought it was Wednesday. Yeah, it is. And that's at 6:30 in the council chambers. And what that is the, the city's been working on this. It's been a big hot topic for the last few years. And Vita, were you on the advisory board? Or were
Yeah.
you? No, I think Alan was. I think Alan was, represented you guys on the, advisory board or this task force. And so they were working with a student group. So they're working on a plan, and so they'll be making their presentation. They worked on this project and then they have to present it before the end of their school year. So this is the best time for them to do that. And we certainly want to have a chance to meet with them. So that's why we're doing the 2-for-1 like that.
So that's gonna be a relatively long meeting? on Wednesday?
They're usually pretty succinct.
Okay.
They've done several projects with the city before. I mean, not this particular group, but this program. So it's really pretty interesting because they they approach it like a consulting group, and they sometimes are represented by different, like they might have a finance person, they might have a engineering type person. I mean, it depends on what the topic is. And then so they kind of approach it from what their process was, what information they gathered. There's usually a survey, there was a survey. And then they share their outcomes and maybe their strategies. That's kind of how they did it.
Will that
before.
meeting be soon or?
Yes, yes.
Okay, because I think I have to be in Moses Lake that night, so I could watch it from there.
Yeah, you can zoom in, for sure. And I think that she added that on, I think Nikki sent out your meeting announcement or the meeting invite, and it's on there, but we can resend that if you don't have that handy, so.
Yeah, the agenda was attached and then it also had.
But we can send it out again too.
Okay.
That's great, thanks.
So I guess we want to talk about any questions that we want to ask or open up for discussion at the joint meeting with council, like we've done in the past, Last year was a busy year where we had the tree policy update, and then they had the economic development plan and then climate change, or the what was it? He had a different term for it. Anyway, there was 3 big agendas that were big topics that council was covering. And it was like, well, gee whiz, we're going this direction and that direction. And this year it seems a little better. It seems like it's kind of settled down a little bit. When Don was there, that was tough, wasn't it? Last year, there was a lot there. And then how is it all going to fold together, and who's going to take a priority? That was my concern, because it was all very difficult.
Over here, you're working on economic development, and over here, you're saying save every single tree, and how do you align those two concerns and policies? And
It's not over.
Yeah.
Here's the next step, and the next step is, and maybe relevant for your meeting with the planning commission to be thinking about this. The legislature just passed I think very ill-advised, every lot is a multifamily lot bill. That is counter to the tree ordinance. Maybe a good thing. And so we may be a leader with respect to tree ordinances. I would expect many municipalities to be looking at tree ordinances, impervious surface coverage, fire access, height restrictions, side yards, or as far as setbacks, and restrictions which will make it more difficult to divide up single family lots or build multiplexes on single family lots to try to maintain the character of their communities. So that's gonna be a statewide suburban issue, and I think tree ordinances are. The same people who are advocating super density want to save the trees in somebody else's neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it all comes literally from, I think it was a county council member or former county executive in Seattle, who, when the GMA started, said he wanted to be able to look out of his high-rise office and see trees in the distance. He didn't want to creep out or to break his view.
I didn't want trees far away. You didn't want trees nearby.
Yeah, well, you want.
You can't build high rise yet.
And all the business and taxes right here, and you want trees where we can go visit somebody else's property on the weekend.
Mhm.
So, it's,
So what are, yeah, I guess that would be a really good question. What are other cities doing to preserve the character of the towns?
Well, as old as Seattle, Seattle is going through this urban forest adoption right now too. And the council's debating it. Well, and as old as Seattle is, and they're debating it, so they're redoing the whole thing. It's a big topic.
It is. And there's
Especially with the
private property issues, there's development issues, there's view issues, there's corridor issues, there's life cycle. I mean, trees are beautiful, but they don't last forever. I mean, so,
There's invasive ones.
and then there's invasive plants that, yeah.
So maybe we just have that kind of a discussion. In a few weeks about this town, you know, where are we at with this whole, all three of these coming together and what is the priority and, you know, just has to.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. We had a conversation. I mean, I'm really interested to hear the report of the students and, you know, sometimes you get really good strategies and direction and sometimes you're like, oh, nice college student presentation. So we'll see, but I'm sure that it'll be interesting. And then we had a conversation about, so where does it land? Because, you know, you got to fit it within your organization. And it's kind of like, well, right now, if you're dealing with permitting and enforcement so that we can get a handle on, you know, the guy that comes out on Sundays chopping them all down in Sylvia's neighborhood, so that's kind of a community development thing, right? Because it's code enforcement, things like that. You're talking about street trees, let's start planting some street trees, then it's really, is it when you're developing streets and building streets and adding them, then that's public works engineering. If it's replacing them because they're of a life cycle or they're destroying the street infrastructure, but it's not a development project, then that often falls into parks and recreation because we manage streets. And then
where's the forester?
Well, that's just it. This city doesn't have one. We hire arborists to do things. So that's the idea, is hiring staff that have expertise. And then, but you can't do it all at once. I mean, there's just no way else you're gonna come in and like do that. So it's like, what's the priority? So that you can get a grip on the program and getting the right people that understand, not saying, okay, you have chainsaws and a shovel, so I'm gonna give this to you, right? And we'll just add it to your program and but you know, you really want to have experts that come in and help whatever the council's policy is, so that we can make sure that we're moving forward. And then what kind of flexibility do you have? You know, I would just say like the list of street trees that are out there aren't appropriate. They're not native species that are appropriate for streets. And so we're trying to say, hey, it's great. We're all about adding trees, or if we remove trees, because if you look along here, they're growing out of the sidewalks in the street because they were planted so many years ago. Is what do we replace it with? It has to be an appropriate tree that's going to survive, right? So mighty oak isn't going to survive next to Main Street here in Lakewood. That's just not going to work. So we want to get the right kind of trees too. And what are they? So we're trying to work through all of those things right now. And then, you know, good intentions. What are they unexpected outcomes? So it's a work in progress. And I think the city was bold in their actions, but then now we have to live with it and figure out, okay, what's working, what's not working. So try to find that balance.
That was pretty much the hottest topic last week.
Yeah, well,
Just talking.
yeah, but they all kind of fold together.
Yeah.
Economic development, climate change, tree policy. I mean, they're right there. They either conflict or they complement each other. Okay, anything else on that, or do you want to move to director's report?
Great, so I thought maybe we could just start and do a summary of Park Appreciation Day. Nikki, did you bring that summary?
Yeah.
You're so smart.
All right, so the park sites included Harry Todd Park, Fort Steilacoom Park, Edgewater Park, Kiwanis Park, and Lakewood Community Garden. Partners and service clubs were West Pierce Fire and Rescue Dive Team, Clover Park School District, Rotary Club of Lakewood, Grave Concerns, the LDS Church, Little Church on the Prairie, Kiwanis Club, and the Lakewood Youth Council, City Council, lots of council members out there. And the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, thank you all for being there. In addition to all of that, we had our regular community partners and service clubs, and grateful to the many volunteers, neighbors, and community members who showed up to volunteer for the day. We estimated about 150 volunteers plus staff. And the projects that we completed were 100 cubic yards of play chips that were moved to provide safety around play equipment, 20 cubic yards of mulch spread to help maintain healthy garden beds. 3 dump trucks full of blackberries were removed from Edgewater Park to provide access and a view of Lake Silicon. 30 cubic yards of mulch was placed around Wahop Lake to help prevent blackberry growth. 20 yards of invasive Scotch broom was removed near the Hillward site at Fort Steilacoom Park. 30 pounds of trash was removed from the swim area at Harrington Park. Historic markers were replaced and graves were groomed at the Historic Patient Cemetery at Fort Steilacoom Park. The playground was scrubbed and graffiti removed from the tables, and the restroom building and skate park surfaces were painted at Kiwanis Park. So great job, you guys.
Yeah. And the community garden, they have a good crew that was and included a lot of youth. And they spent a lot of time explaining to them what the whole gardening techniques and had them start planting plants, and they moved a lot of chips and stuff out of the community garden.
That's great.
I heard a really good report from you about the amount of trash that was removed at Harry Todd from the water, and it had been tons. And now it's up to only 30 pounds, so that's.
Yeah, when Janet was, by the time I got to Harry Todd, they'd come and gone, so they had already left, and I was letting Janet know that in the early days of Parks Appreciation Day, we had, I think it's called the 60-yard, I mean, it's the semi-size with the big lid that you crank down, and we couldn't even get the lid down. It was filled with just stuff from the waterfront area, the swim area, I mean, so much stuff. And every year the dumpster's gotten smaller and smaller, and this year they had, what'd you say, like these onion bags full of stuff. So so and we go from one side, American Lake to Harry Todd, each year they switch sides, so they clean up the swim area in advance of our summer season. So yeah, so it's good to see
about that.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to call it appreciation.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
That's good.
So Nikki, we were thinking that we could maybe look for some old photos from the early days and see if we could get a couple of things. And I was saying that one year we cleaned up at American Lake Park. And I think it might have been the year that we were doing a bunch of landscaping there, because we had people all over the place, the service clubs. I think they took out like 54 or 84, something number sticking in my head, tires. We had to bring a trailer down, and it was just full of tires. Like maybe that had fallen off boat launch or boat trailers, or just all it was just, tons and tons of tires.
Dredge that stuff up.
Well, we had the underwater dive teams.
Oh, I see.
The dive teams, and so we try and pull those days. The year when we had the giant dumpster at the top, I mean, we didn't have any access, so it was like wheelbarrows pulling this heavy dredge stuff up the hill too, because the big thing was in front of the row club. And like I said, we couldn't even close it. Old lawn chairs. I mean, there's so much stuff. But yeah, so it's nice now that it's literally, they use it as a training day too, right? They get their scuba gear on.
Who would think to throw their stuff in some place like that? I mean, that just, today I had a microwave that needed to be recycled. And you just go online and you Google and you find out 2 or 3 places right here in Lakewood that you can take a microwave. I wouldn't go throw it in the lake.
Well, at the top of Harry Todd, you get to watch it go.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
It's on an old skateboard. You get 2 for 1. Anyway, so, yeah, we're grateful. Thank you. We thought it was a good day and it was a nice day.
It wasn't.
So,
It was good.
and, we have a Scotch brew people that come every week to the park and they have been eradicating that. I mean, they've been there as long as I've been here and I think they were here long before the city incorporated. So there's a group of folks that are there every single week. Rolling
Used to work
Scotch
with
brew.
a team like that on the prairies in
Yeah.
Thurston County.
Yeah, so they really make a difference. I mean, it really has, and it's all hand done. We have the wrenches that they pull out. It's hard work, but yeah,
Mike, Captain Grant thought that was pretty and brought it over to
yeah,
Vancouver Island.
yeah. And they planted it all along the freeways. You remember, it was all Scotch broom and women, so mitigation. Anyway, so thank you all for your hard work, and that was fun, and appreciate everybody coming out and helping, meeting their neighbors and taking care of business. The legislature just finished, they just closed, what do you call that? And they adjourned, thank you. They adjourned. City did well in the parks area. We probably have almost $3 million in grant allocations. So we have $2.1 million for Wards Lake, and that was 3 different grants to support Wards Lake Park, and they all match each other. And then we got $350,000 to build 4 pickleball courts at Harry Todd. And then we got $309,000 to move the Nisqually project forward that we've been talking to. And we've been working on it all this time to be ready for when and if we can get our contract. But so it was a good successful year. The city also was successful in some other areas as well. But regarding parks, this was a good year for us. So keep moving forward with all of our great grants and doing more at the parks to do some open space. The non-motorized, I think the council is going to be approving the non-motorized plan, and it wasn't presented to us, but I think they're coming next month or the month after to talk to us about the update.
Next month's our joint council meeting.
Oh,
so
next June, yeah. So Public Works will be coming and chatting with us about the non-motorized plan, how that fits in our legacy plan. And some of you were out at the art dedication 1st of April, so we dedicated the artwork at the site. It was a nice event with good turnout. And so that worked out well. The city council is working with, or the city's working with Pierce County to transfer the old settler cemetery. So we'll have 2 cemeteries in the park system. City manager's been kind of talking about, Pierce County's been trying to give it to us for a long time, and the city manager was talking with him because at first the concern was that they really weren't like keeping it tidy and it looks kind of overrun. They would mow it once a year, and when it's in bloom, it looks beautiful. But so when they started talking about transferring that, I was working with the stewardship staff there, and it's really it's got amazing native plants and unique species, and so it's really not just to mow it down and make the edges look pretty. It's really how do we sustain that. So we'll be working with them to make sure that we fully understand, because there's a whole stewardship group that's been working on that area. We want to make sure that we're taking care of those native plants properly. So more to come on that, and that'll be a nice educational place as well, and hopefully not an active cemetery.
So it would be turning into a park, or it would be?
Well, it's in the park system.
In the park.
It's a cemetery. So we have a cemetery at Fort Slocum Park as well.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, we're not gonna put in, there's probably picnic tables there now, but we just want to make sure that we're managing it properly, respecting the space and following state law regarding some.
So you're gonna move it into the, you're moving it? I'm not understanding.
Transferring ownership.
Transferring ownership. Pierce County owns the land in Lakewood, and so the city of Lakewood would own the land in Lakewood, and then it would go under the system, the park system, I guess.
So it's a unique situation because cemeteries without an endowment or ownership or some sort of trust that are essentially abandoned pass to counties under state law. However, this one was actually deeded to the county while Washington was a territory.
Oh, before incorporation.
Before statehood, and so it wasn't a park or a property that transferred to the city on incorporation because it was a county-owned park.
Okay.
And so it's kind of a donut hole.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
How many acres is it?
About 4 1/4.
Wow.
4 1/4.
Oh,
Yeah, I was just looking at it. So,
it's the one on Washington.
on Washington Boulevard, and next to it is a church and then the water district. So, So there's some kind of nice open space there. And we'll learn more about that. We're really lucky that we have the Graves Concern that really has been with the cemetery in at Fort Slocum Park, really working on the restoration of that and honoring the folks that are there. And so it'll be interesting to do some research. I'm sure there's research on that cemetery in some location. We'll get whatever the county has.
Yeah, there are some lists of burials, it's not complete, there's some war veterans there.
Yeah.
I mean, it dates back to 1880, at least the 1880s, I think. Actually, somebody's idea back in the 1860s.
Yeah, so it will be nice to find out more about it and then maybe work with a volunteer group, maybe Graves Concern is interested, because I know that they've gone over and done some work and helped out on McNeil, or I think it was McNeil Island, one of their historic cemeteries out there. So they may be interested in maybe doing some research if they have folks that might not be able to do the grave work, the hard work doing that, maybe they do some research and we'll just, add it to the open space plan, another 4.5 acres, and then, but just make sure that we're treating it properly, right? And I know they're gonna be making some improvements along this. They talked about maybe doing some frontage improvements and fencing and things. So anyway, so that's that. The community garden folks came and worked with our older adults. They're starting a gardening club with our senior center, so to speak, gardening club. And so Jim and his team came out. Jim Endicott and
He called himself just Jim every time you asked him.
yeah, well, that's Jim and 2 other friends came and provided an update. So
That's good.
we have save the date cards. I don't know if you all got them, but they were part of the I think we're handing some of those out, and so that's just talked to you about some of the events that we have coming up. The next ones are going to be, we have a fishing event coming up in May 13th. It's going to be at Harry Todd this year. It's the first time, we have the new fishing pier there, so it'll be interesting to see how that works, even though we'll be fishing off the shore. But
So is Cameron connecting with the volunteers that I sent him, because he asked me, are we
They
getting
asked you
that?
again?
So the people from our church asked, are we connecting? And I want to be sure that.
yeah, I talked to Cameron earlier in the week and he said he was expecting volunteers, so I'm hoping that he has connected with the right people. So I'll make sure who should he be, which,
There.
and he has that information.
He should, yeah.
If not, I'll have him maybe give you a buzz and
Sure.
or give you a help, so.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
They're excited to do it. We want
Yeah.
this.
Oh, we don't want to miss that. We rely on him. That was such a great resource
Yeah.
last year. So I want to make sure that he's working with the right people. And then just other than that, we were putting this little list together for our city manager. We talked about park projects. We have 19 active capital projects. Might be 18 because technically I think we bought the land behind the onboard Lake finally, but 19 capital projects at about $26 million
Wow,
that we're working on right now.
wow,
We're really busy.
yeah.
So we got a lot going on, so we'll be making some dents in that, so.
Mm.
Anyway, that's all I have.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah,
That's all I have right now. I can probably.
any board comments?
Council comments.
I have one comment. The school district property that's just south of the cemetery, that's like 2 blocks south and it's vacant.
Are you talking about are you talking about Lake City Elementary? No,
Yeah, I
Lake City
think so.
Elementary?
And it's not being used right now. Is there an interest in converting that or transferring it to Parkscape?
From the school district's point of view, I was told no.
From the city's perspective, yeah.
When the city was interested, well, maybe it could be the park, maybe it could be a development project, could be a catalyst for more redevelopment of Lake City. Even though it's not of the size that is normally used for an elementary school these days, the school district said they wanted to save it in case they needed it. So it's kind of in limbo status that way. And having been a school director in a different district one time, I can say with some assurance, that school districts are land hoarders.
Mhm.
It's so hard for them to get new land.
Yeah.
They retain a one-room schoolhouse lot for an extra 50 years, just in
Just in
case.
case.
Yeah, could there be, and I'm just throwing this out, a short-term agreement, 20-year agreement to have it for recreational purposes with the clause that, yeah, they need it, they get it back, but it stays under the schools.
Yeah, we did chat with them early on because what they did was when they used it as an intermediate or school, like in between while they were building, they
Oh,
used
yeah,
it like
yeah.
they were doing
Sure.
man and the kids, they were doing that, and then they just knocked the building down, and then it was this,
Cut fire.
caught fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway,
It's
the building,
fortuitous, actually.
yeah, they were probably grateful.
They never would have torn it down.
Yeah. But anyway, so then they weren't opening the gates because they were concerned about liability and such, even though they have recreational immunity, but well, we just drove by there because I was doing a park tour and there's a lady walking her dog in there, so.
Sure.
Yeah, so people did rely on that open space because, American Lakes, there's a park, but it's not an open space like that, right? It's not set up that way, so,
A lot of acres.
yeah, and so
About
it's.
10 acres.
Is that right?
Yeah, so it's a good space. I would say from a school district, it'd be great if they even just open it up so that people could use it as open space, so I don't know if because we talked to them quite a bit, several times about that, and the citizens were coming to the park board, or the school board and talking about that too, just for that open space element. So I don't know if there's a hole in the fence that lady was using, or if they actually had the gates open, but I will just know that if working in Seattle or some of those other places is that, oh, no, we want to take this land and turning it into a park or community garden. And then when it's time to be used for the fire station or whatever they need, it's like everybody forgets that they said, no problem, we'll be happy to use that space. So I mean, I don't, at this point, I mean, it's a viable space and definitely there's need in that area because
Right. That's what I was thinking.
Washington Park's over there. Oh, we didn't go to Washington Park.
Next time.
Yeah, so I don't know, that's a good idea.
Yeah. it's-
Put it in notes, mark it down.
Okay, so we got a meeting on next week on Wednesday, May 3rd with the planning commission. And then we have the joint meeting council on May 22nd.
Mhm.
And we'll probably meet prior to the 5:30 with the council, like a half hour before, just to get our ducks in a row. or-
7.
Oh, it's 7, it's not.
Boy.
It's 7.
If you want to make sure you have all the correct information, we certainly can gather in advance just to make sure that we're up, because we're gonna update that handout, make sure it'll go to council, it'll go in their council packets, we'll have it updated for council, we'll send it to you in advance. And then we can meet a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
find a spot to gather and just
15, 20
touch base before we go in.
So one more thing, so we had talked sessions before about starting at 5. Can we bring that up at some other meeting?
Yeah, I think so. We're kind of waiting for Jason to come in, but
Okay,
we'll keep it on the agenda.
good.
Yeah, we'll add it to the
Yeah.
June agenda.
All right, and I have a motion.
It's a move.
All right.
Second.
Very good. Thank you.
So thank you, everybody, for going.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for your presentation. We appreciate
Yeah,
it.
good.
Maybe you have it, right?
Well,
Yeah, well, so sorry.